Through a series on the Lord's Prayer. I'm convinced that at the end of this series, you will totally understand what the Lord's Prayer is. Many of us have it memorized, but we just say the words and don't fully understand exactly what it means. So let's take a look at it again, the beginning of it here, Matthew 6:9. It says, "Then this is how you should pray," Jesus told us. "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." Now we looked at Father, which is Daddy, our Daddy in heaven. Marcy just made reference to that up here, our Daddy in heaven. We looked at heaven, where we're going to spend eternity. And last week we looked at hallowed be thy name, honoring God. Those of you that are parents, okay, how many of you just totally appreciate it when your children honor you? Isn't that awesome? Isn't that awesome when your children honor you, when they respect you, when they honor you, when they put you up? That is just an incredible feeling. I wonder if God feels that same way about his children when we honor him. So last week we looked at honoring God while we're here on Sunday mornings. And we looked at the fact of honoring God during his message, when he's sharing the word. And now last week we all stood just to honor his word. And then we looked at honoring God during worship. And I challenged you that there was a time where you don't go back and chit-chat with your friends, or you don't go outside, because that's not honoring to God. Honoring to God is respecting him by listening to what he has to say. And then honoring him during worship by really worshiping him, lifting him up. And now we're going to look at a third way of honoring God. So let's take a look at it. And I want to just share, it was kind of interesting. Linda was not here last week. And Linda said that she couldn't sleep one night. She's just laying in bed, it was so hot, and she's in the living room floor, she's in the bedroom floor, she couldn't sleep. And she kept hearing God say, you know, it's great that you have a church as a family that feels close to one another, but there needs to be respect in your church. And I'm kind of like, oh my goodness. What she didn't know is that's exactly what God talked to us about last week and laid it on her heart, so confirming to me that the Spirit is so alive here and speaks to things. And again, you're going to find a little bit later here with another one where God's Spirit is just alive and cares about us and is bringing things together. So now we're going to look at another way of honoring God. Proverbs 3 says this: honor, hallowed the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Honor God with your wealth. Now, most of us here say, that gets me off the hook. I am far from being wealthy. But you know, you may say, I'm on disability. I don't even have a job. Listen now, listen to this. I want to challenge you on something now. If you're retired, if you're on disability, if you're drawing unemployment, if you are on summer vacation, you have a wealth of time. A wealth of time that you could be using for God instead of feeling sorry for yourself. Are you honoring God with that wealth of time? Or are you keeping it all for yourself? Imagine you've got 24 hours every day. What are you doing with that 24 hours? Is any of it for God? Are you helping anybody out? Are you there for people that are hurting? I don't have anybody. Time is precious. Is time precious, Dave, when you're working as many hours as you're working? Mike, is time precious when you're working as many hours? Dave, it's kind of like, time is precious. You have a wealth of time. Now, some of you out there, you have an abundance, you have a wealth of gifts. Some of you have the gift of teaching. You have the gift of leadership. You have the gift of administration. You have the gift of music. You have the gift of helps. You have the gift of mercy. You have the gift of faith. You have the gift of giving. Some of you have multiple gifts. How many are you using? Or are you keeping them all for yourself? Because you honor God when you use your time. You honor God when you use your gifts. You honored God when you used your gift of leadership and administration of the women's retreat. That was honoring to God. It was a gift that you had, and you used it to honor God. Paul, you honor God with your gift of music. We say it all the time. We don't know how blessed we are here by having such an incredible guitar player. It's kind of like, you're honoring God when you do that. And when you meet in your home every Wednesday to practice, that's using your gifts. How many of you have gifts that you're not using? It's not just money. But it could be money. It could be money. Maybe some of you have an abundance of money. Maybe some of you have an extra homes. Maybe some of you actually have CDs or IRAs or stocks and bonds. Some of you have savings accounts. Some of you have money left over at the end of the month. You'd like to have that feeling, huh, Dave? It's kind of, how generous are you with that? How generous are you with that? Now, I always say before, I don't ever want to share a message where God isn't talking to me at the same time. So, I don't say this boastfully. I just want to say this because you hear me say it all the time. Man, I just love life. I love life. It don't get any better. They always say when you're on your deathbed, this is when you know you've had a good life, when you're not sitting there laying there in your deathbed saying, I wish. Because I will not be saying, I wish. When my son asks me, how you doing? It don't get any better. And then they kind of look at you like, no, how you doing? It don't get any better. How you doing? It don't get any better. It can't get any better for me. Now listen to this. Most of my friends that I golf with are my age. Okay? Now I'm going to be 69 pretty soon. They're all retired. They're all retired. And they're looking at me like, how come you're not enjoying life? How come you're not out there with your wife taking vacations and going to Vegas and golfing 3 times a week? How come you're not enjoying life? And I look at them saying, oh, you little do you know. I am enjoying life because I'm using my time. I'm honoring God with my time. And then my gifts. God has given me several gifts, and I use them all. I use my gift of teaching, I use my gift of leadership, of administration, of giving, of helps, and then I use some gifts that I don't have. God has not given me the gift of music. But I do it anyway. I do it anyway. He's not given me the gift of mercy, but I still go visit you when you're in the hospital. He has not given me the gift of faith, but I still pray over you. So I'm using the gifts that I do have and ones that I don't have. And then my wealth. Now, you need to know that I'm on a fixed income now, okay? I'm on a fixed income. I'm not in my business anymore, so I'm on a fixed income. But I use my extra generously. Generously. I use my extra. Think nothing of it. I think nothing of it. When I see a need, that's what I'm there for. Because I honor God. How are you doing? How are you doing? Do you want to have as great a life as I have with a smile on your face all the time? I literally have a smile on my face all the time. Even when I'm golfing and I chunk it. I don't sit there and I just kind of smile and just kind of, whoop, that was a bad shot. And they all look shaking their head like, yeah, that was a bad shot. It's a game. Hardly anybody remembers their score the next week. It's a game. I love life. God has just given me an incredible life. And I know why. Because I'm honoring him. I'm honoring him. Are you honoring God? Let's take a look. You need to hear from God. Let's hear from God, okay? Let's look at Proverbs 14:31. It says this, he who oppresses the poor. Now remember, poor is not just poor in money. You could be, that family that lost their baby is poor. I'm not talking about money. They're poor in grief. In grief. And you were there for them. You were there for them. So he says, he who oppresses the poor, if you don't care about them, you show contempt for their maker. But whoever is kind to the needy honors God. Hallows God. You have to care, people. You have to care. You have to be willing to use your time. You have to be willing to use your gifts. And if you have money, you need to be willing to use your money to help, because that's what life is all about. It's people. It's people. That's what life is all about. There's many of them that go to the grave, keep it all their time. There are many of them that go to the graves, keep it all their talents. Many of them that go to the grave with millions of dollars in the bank. Take a gun and shoot me. And then they wonder why their life was not good. You want to have an abundant life? Honor God. Honor God. And let's look at the 1917. Look at this. He who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward him for what he has done. When you're kind to a family that's losing the baby, and you're there from God says, I will reward you for that kindness. What goes around comes around. One day you will need somebody by your side, and they will be there because you were there for others. That's how God works. That's how God works. Proverbs 22:9. A generous man will himself be blessed, for he shares his food, shares his time, shares his gifts with the poor. I can vouch for that. 28:27. He who gives to the poor will lack nothing, but he who closes his eyes to them receives many curses. I lack nothing. There isn't nothing that when somebody, what would you like to have? If you could live your life over again, what would you do differently? Nothing. If you could have anything right now, what would it be? I got everything. I have everything I want. Why is that? I can't help but believe because I'm honoring God. That's what the word says. Because I'm honoring God. That's why I have the life that I have. 31:20. I like this. This whole chapter is on a woman of noble character. This is what a woman of noble character has, and lists a whole bunch of things. I ought to do a series on this sometime. Here's one of them. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. That's a woman of noble character. How do we do this? How do we do this? Let's take a look. Deuteronomy 26:12 tells us this. When you have finished setting aside 1/10 of all your produce in the land, in the 3rd year, the year of the tithe, you shall give it to the Levite, the alien, the fatherless, and the widow, so that they may eat in your towns and be satisfied. Now, who's the Levite, the alien, the fatherless, and the widow that we're to help? I've explained this to you before. When God put his people into the promised land, he divided the land up among them. They each had a portion. But the Levites did not get any land because they were to take care of the church. So all the other tribes were to give 1/10 of what they got in produce and cattle, etc., to give to the Levites because they were taking care of the church. That's why the main reason why you tithe to a church. so that the people that run the church, that run God's church, are taken care of. Now, the advantage you have here at this church is that we all work for free. Dave and I, like Paul and Mike and Paul and so many others in here, the whole thing is about, like Paul said, I don't want to be a burden to anybody. He said, so I will work all day, I'll be a tent maker all day, and then I'll teach you at night, because I don't want to be a burden to you. But he did say, but I do have the right to earn an income from you because I teach the word to you. And the word tells us that. So we're to give to support the church. So we do. We have rent that we have to pay here. We have some insurance that we have to pay. We have children's supply, different things that we have to do, music supplies that we take care. But we all work for free. And then there's the alien. Now, an alien at that time was someone that came in from another country. All right? Now, what I want to do is I want to take this from what their land was to a church now. So the Levites were the leaders of the church. The alien would be the visitors that come in here. The visitors that come in here. You take care of them. You take care of them. You meet their needs. It's kind of like all those children that came in from, what was it? What country did they come in from? Ecuador or wherever they're from? It wasn't Ecuador. Where is it? Guatemala. You know, hundreds of them. There's thousands. There's literally hundreds of thousands of them out there. Kind of like in India. They're aliens and fatherless. Now, here's the reason that God had this for back then is because if your father died, you had no way of taking care of yourself. The women had, the widows, you see right after the widows, women didn't work. The women didn't work. So you had no way of supporting yourself. You were at the mercy of others to take care of you. Now today we have the government that takes care of many of us. Some of you are on disability. Some of you are on food stamps. Some of you are on unemployment income. Some of you are on Social Security. The government helps to take care of some of us now, but there's still the responsibility of the church to make sure that they're taken care of. That's the way it was back then, and it's still that way today. So who are we to help? We're to help the people in Collision and people that we know outside of Collision, like that family, that literally have needs. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later on, what constitutes a need. Now, let's look at Deuteronomy 14:29. So that the Levites who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, I just explained that, and the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns, in your church, may come and eat and be satisfied, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. You want Collision to be blessed? You want Collision to be able to say the same thing that I can say? Life don't get any better? Well, the church can't say it doesn't get any better when we take care of the needs that are in the church. That's what a church can say the same thing that I can say by taking care of the needs that are in the church. Then we will be blessed. Matthew 19:21. There was a young man that came to Jesus and said, what do I have to do to be blessed? And Jesus says, well, follow the commandments. So I have followed all of them already. He says, well, do you want to be perfect? And the guy says, yeah, I want to be perfect. Jesus answered, if you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions, give them to the poor, then you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. And the young man couldn't do that because he had much treasure. He was kind of, I want to do that. It's not easy giving your money away, so you know that. It's not easy. It's not like, oh, I think it has to be a gift. I think it has to be a gift. We can give our time, we give our talents, but this is hard to give. That's why the money is the second most talked about subject in the Bible, is money. Because we have a hard time letting go of that. We have a hard time letting go of that. Now let's take a look at Deuteronomy 15:4. However, there should be no poor among you. Collision, there should be no poor among you. For in the land of the Lord your God has given you possess, and as your inheritance he will richly bless you. There should be no poor among you. 15:6. Now I'm going to talk more about this. For the Lord your God will bless you as he has promised, and you will lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you. I want to share with you something. That's why the United States is still blessed. Sometimes I think God must just look down at the United States of America and just go, oh. But he doesn't. He still blesses us. Want to know why? Because the United States gives away 80% of what's given away in the world today. 80% comes from the United States. We are still willing to give, and that's why God still blesses the United States. That's why no one is over us, and we don't have to borrow from anybody, because we are generous. We are generous. Woe the day when we're not generous. Now, I don't want to get mixed up in this whole thing with all these children coming over, and I'm not sure about all that. I'm not sure about all that. Because there's so many of them. But at the same time, when they're here, you don't just say, we don't care about you. Because woe the day when you say, we don't care about you. I don't know, this is what's sad about some of it. I have a friend of mine that's 40 years old, him and his wife, they can't have children, and they're trying to adopt, and the adoption agency is saying, well, you're too old. So they won't give them any children. Connecticut just had 500 of them. They would have taken 2 or 3 of them gladly and would have been excited about it. So the system's a little bit screwed up, I understand that. And most of us adopt animals all the time. We just did. I don't want it. My wife did, and I couldn't say no to her. So we adopted this dog. When we go somewhere, we have to get a house sitter. I guess where that dog costs us just as much as a person does. Why didn't we adopt a kid instead? What's the difference? And the kid doesn't poop in the backyard. Let's look more. Let's look more. Let's look at Deuteronomy now 15:7 and 8. If there is a poor man among your brothers in any of the towns in your church that the Lord your God has given you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards your poor brother. Whoa. Rather be open-handed and freely lend him whatever he needs. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, okay? So those of you that are sitting out there with your hands open, be careful here now, okay? Okay, a couple more verses. Malachi 3:10 and 12. You're all familiar with this. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, says the Lord. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you'll not have enough room for it. I can vouch for this. I will prevent pests from destroying your crops and the vines in your fields, and will not cast their fruit. They won't lose the fruit off the tree, says the Lord Almighty. Now let's look at Acts 4:32. And the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of his possessions was his own, but they shared everything they had. 4:34 and 35. There were no needy persons among them. For from time to time, those who owned lands or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales, put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to everyone as he had need. There are so many verses in the Bible on this. So many verses in the Bible on this, okay? However, this is where I'm going to be a little tough now. Okay? But I'm tough in love. I want want you to take this as love. I don't know how many times when I was raising my kids, they would do something, and I would just shake my head like I'm like, what the heck were you thinking? How many parents ever say that to you? Yeah. Yeah, we all say, what? Oh, you say that too? Really? Which one? Don't say it. We all say that. But do we give up on them then? Just throw our hands up in the air? I've given up with you. What do? You teach them. You teach them. When they make a mistake, you teach them so they hopefully won't make that mistake again. And if they do, you continue to teach them. That's how they become mature adults, is by mom and dad teaching them. We have to do that same thing as a church. We have to teach you. Sometimes both. Sometimes both. It's kind of like when someone gives their life to the Lord and they're 70 years old, they're a baby Christian. They're 70 years old, but they're a baby Christian. And then someone else gives the Lord, like Alexia, maybe when she was like 8 years old, and she was a baby Christian, so the 7-year-old and the 8-year-old are equal. Because they're equal in their knowledge of Jesus. So some of you may be in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, and your 70s, and you have some stuff to learn. You still have some stuff to learn. Because my guess is no one has taught you this yet. No one has taught you how to live without making serious mistakes. How to live within your income. I mean, the worst thing that we can have, and I have it, I mean, because it's just so convenient, but these are just, I mean, this is a 666. When it talks about the Antichrist, it's just so easy to use these darn things. It's so easy to use these things. But boy, at the end of the month, it catches up on you. All of a sudden you get that bill, it's got, whoa, there's got to be a mistake here. It's like your electric bill. Air conditioner on, lights left on, fans left on, and then you get the bill, it's got, wait a minute, call the electric company. Something wrong with the meter here at my house. Because we don't learn. I don't know how many times my kids used to, I'd go in a room, as soon as they left the room, I'd shut the light off. They take too long a shower, I'd shut the hot water off. They'd leave the room with the fan on, and I was right there to shut the fan off. It's kind of like, they'd open the fridge door and stare at it inside. And then my wife, gah! She'd be washing it and leave the water on, or she's going somewhere, and I'd go over and turn the water off. And then she's in the refrigerator and then goes to get something, and the fridge door is wide open. So I go there and close the fridge door. What was I doing? I was teaching them. No, it wasn't always with a smile on my face. Damn it, can you leave the door closed? Do you have to leave the light on all the time? Now, when you do it that way, what do? Yeah.
Exactly.
It just goes on one ear and right out the other when you treat them that way. But if you do it right, if you do it with love and respect, then it's going, all right, Dad, sorry. I mean, my wife even told me she was sorry one time. But that was when I thought I had a heart attack. That's when I thought I had a heart attack. We have to teach now. Now it's time to teach. Now it's time to teach. If you're genuinely poor, if there's genuinely need, then we're to take care of it. But we have to teach you some things. And here's one of them. And some of us just, we take this for granted because we were just raised to do this, and so we just assume everybody else knows how to do the same thing. But most people have no idea what it means to have a budget. when you say that word is just so foreign to them. And then we don't have any good representation of it. Our government is not good representation. We're trillions of dollars in debt. Our states are not good examples of this. Our cities are not a good example. They're all in debt. So no one's teaching us how to do this. You have a certain income. You have a certain income. You have to live within that income. You have to do that. You have to do it. You have to learn how to do that. And the way you do that is you make a budget so that you can see where your money's going. Because when you see where your money's going, then you don't make those mistakes. Because it's just too easy to spend money. Way too easy. I see it on Facebook all the time. All the time. I see it. Even as simple as this. You can't pay your rent. You can't fix your car. You can't do this, you can't do that, but you can buy Starbucks.
Right?
I don't buy Starbucks. I could buy the Starbucks store, but I don't buy the Starbucks because it's too dang expensive. And I can afford it. I can buy a Starbucks store. I've actually wanted one, but I don't buy it because it's too expensive. You have to learn these things. You have to learn some of these things. Doesn't mean that, because the easiest thing we can do is say, oh, they get to go on vacation, they get to have Starbucks. Well, none of us are the same. How many of your children have said that to you? Oh, you favor Sabrina, over me. God, I got that all the time with my kids. I got that all the time. Yeah. I got that same thing. Did I favor one over the other? No. Even my stepson to this day, that's not my blood, says, Dad, you were an awesome dad. You didn't favor any of us over the other one. And he realizes that now when he's in his 40s. He didn't realize that when he was in his teens. It's not that God is favoring anybody. God doesn't favor anybody. It's not about what you have that brings happiness. It's not things that bring happiness, people. It's people that bring happiness. That's what gives you happiness. Paul said, I've learned what it's like to have nothing, and I learned to have to be content when I had everything. Because it's people. So we have to learn to live within our budgets. So we have to teach that. And lo and behold, we have a couple in our church that has learned that. In fact, he came to me with his books to ask me what series he should use, and it's kind of like, I've never taken these classes, I don't know. I just know it intuitively. I never took the class, but I just learned it intuitively how to live within my budget. And it wasn't always that case. I mean, we were married for almost 7 years before I took my first vacation because we couldn't afford vacations. My kids to this day always say, Dad, how come we never go out to eat? Because it's too expensive. It's too expensive. So we eat at home where it's not so expensive. I just learned to do things intuitively when I was younger. But there's someone in our church, Robert and Tracy, they're going to start teaching on how to manage your money. God, you got to learn this. That is almost as important as learning this. Because it's no fun to be poor. It is no darn fun at the end of the month not to be able to pay your bills. Life is miserable. So you can look at me and say, oh yeah, Jim, yeah, easy for you to say, you got money. I didn't always have money. I had no idea what a savings account was for 40 years of my marriage. Did not have a savings account. You know, I don't know how many times we broke open a piggy bank because we made sure we got the piggy banks that didn't have the opening in the bottom of it because we knew that if it did, we'd take the money out of it. So there was times when we had to break the piggy piggy bank open just to be able to make ends meet. I had to work hard. And my wife cleaned 2 houses a day. 2 big houses a day. Those 2-story houses, she cleaned 2 a day. And I worked 7 days a week. So we made it with hard work and without spending foolishly. I had a 69 Mach 1 when I first got married. I had to sell that thing. And buy a station wagon. An ugly looking station wagon too. So we're to help you, but we're to help you when you learn to help yourself. When you learn to help yourself. When you learn how to live within a budget. And then when you do that and you still have needs, then we're to be there for you. We're to be there for you. But you gotta learn this. You gotta learn this. And it's our job to teach you this. We're teaching you because we love you. Because we love you.